of News Breakfast.
OK, let's stick with that theme and bring in former diplomat in Washington and Liberal Senator Dave Sharma, who joins us now from Canberra. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Catherine.
Good to have you on the show this morning. What can we expect if Kamala Harris is elected? We don't know what to expect. What do you expect from an Australian point of view if she wins that first term and presidency?
Well, look, I think it'll largely be a continuation of the Biden administration with whom we've got good relations. The major pieces of our bilateral relationship, the free trade agreement, the Quad, the AUKUS arrangement to acquire nuclear-powered submarines. I don't expect them to be any danger, and in many respects it'll be business as usual. But by the same token, I think if we're dealing with the Trump administration, I don't actually think it necessarily means a whole lot for Australia. Certainly it might mean quite a different US leadership role in the world, but for Australia in particular, I think we could work equally well with either side.
So, Senator, like with Harris, are you expecting more of the same with a second Donald Trump term? You don't expect to see changes because we're seeing commentators say with the departure of a lot of his key staff, some of whom have spoken out against him, that it will be very different, but you don't expect that.
Well, look, I'll just make the point that we worked quite closely with the Trump administration when it was in office from 2016 to 2020. In terms of Trump's worldview, we are an ally in good standing. We are a security treaty ally of the United States that spends more than 2% of GDP on defence. We run a trade deficit with the United States, that is, they run a trade surplus with us. So to the extent he's been critical on alliances and critical on allies freeloading on US security or taking advantage of them in trade terms, I don't think Australia fits within that category. So I don't think we're going to face any difficulties. I think AUKUS would be safe under a Trump administration. We can't take anything for granted. But my readings and discussions with people in Washington suggest there's a pretty strong bipartisan consensus in support of that program.
Senator, if Trump is elected and he reignites that trade war with China, how will Australia navigate that?
Well, we are a nation that benefits from a global trading network and free trade. So, higher protectionism around the world, higher tariffs, higher trade will have an impact on Australia. And particularly if there's a significant trade war with China that slows China's economic growth. China is still the largest market for Australian exports. That will have an impact on us. But, I suspect what we've seen from Trump and his rhetoric might not necessarily be what's translated into reality. We've got to remember that whichever party wins the White House may or may not control the Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. And often candidates make promises on the campaign trail that once they're in office, they tone down, they wind back, or they don't deliver in full.
You've been an ambassador in Israel. Can we expect a better chance of peace and a resolution to tension in the Middle East, but also in Ukraine with a Harris administration or a Trump administration?
Look, I think they're two quite different propositions. Trump, in his first term in office, and everything he's said on the record since, suggests he's a very strong supporter of Israel's right to defend itself and right to defeat aggressive threats against it. So I don't necessarily expect much different in the way of diplomatic strategy in the Middle East. Trump famously conducted an airstrike on Qasem Soleimani, the senior commander in the Iranian armed forces, so he's quite hawkish towards Iran. On Russia-Ukraine, I think that's quite difficult to read. Trump has said that he will enforce a settlement, if you like, or reach an agreement within a day or so. Now, I just don't think that's possible, given the positions of Zelensky and Putin, without imposing a solution on one side or the other. And I think it would be very bad for not only US security interests, but Western security interests, if an accommodation was reached with Vladimir Putin of Russia, which leaves Russia in control and de facto sovereign over large chunks of Ukraine. That's something I'm quite concerned about in the scenario of a Trump administration.
Senator, before I let you go, just really quickly on Qantas, Allegra Spender has announced she will be relinquishing her Chairman's Lounge membership. Will you be doing the same?
I'll be declaring any upgrades I receive or have asked for. I've never asked for and never received any upgrades, and other than that, I'll be complying with the Senate rules. I think there are different tests here that apply if you're a minister in a government, and especially if you're a minister who's regulating a sector, the Transport Minister or the Prime Minister.
Your declarations, you say, are up to date, but there's a problem with declarations not being up to date, and that's a bit of a cop-out, blaming admin. Crucially, that's a lack of transparency. Does there need to be penalties for declarations not being up to date?
Well, the Senate Privileges Committee and other parts of the Parliament do look into this. I don't want to see people punished for innocent oversights, but if declarations are not up to date, well then people should be updating and refreshing them, and people all across the political spectrum have been doing that in the past weeks. And, you know, I generally behave with an assumption of good faith towards my parliamentary colleagues. Most people here are overwhelmingly here for the right reason, to serve their communities and to improve Australia.
Senator, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.